Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting, the Oh, hey girl, I see you edition. Today is episode 181. Skeleton of Spanish monk actually belongs to an indigenous woman, and male dominance in primates isn't the default after all. My friends, if you're a long-time listener of this show, then you know, other than a staggering hole, be it a black hole or a gargantuan sinkhole to a self-inflicted hole, we love a good rewrite. For example, way the fuck back in the second half of In-Betweeny 106, we spoke about a small cave on the remote island of Borneo, where researchers found a 31,000-year-old skeleton belonging to a young man who seemingly had his left foot amputated for health reasons, making this the oldest known successful amputation ever found so far. Thanks to bone growths on his shin, we know the man recovered and likely survived for years afterwards. My four-limbed friends, this discovery completely rewrote which civilizations had what knowledge when. For you see, this discovery meant the hunter-gatherer society of this Southeast Asian island 31,000 years ago had to possess detailed knowledge of limb structure, muscles, and blood vessels to prevent fatal blood loss. It also implies that these prehistoric peoples used antiseptics and antimicrobial agents to control infection, suggesting this community possessed damn impressive medical knowledge. For context, for how wild this discovery was, the earliest known successful surgery prior to this was on an elderly male farmer in what is now France from 7,000 years ago. He had his left forearm amputated just above the elbow, and I'm sorry, France. This is just one example of the many rewrites we've covered, and we're going to tack on two more. Today, in the first half of the show, we've got a fun one, and one that is long overdue. Back in 2017, after an earthquake struck southern Mexico, more than buildings began to show cracks. My friends, we are going to tell the tale of a centuries-old palace, which stands upon the land of an even centuries-older indigenous culture. Inside the palace are the remains of a human being long thought to be that of a colonizer. But thanks to that earthquake, restorations had to be made, and archaeologists took a chance to not only fix up the place, but have a second look at the body. As you can tell from the title of today's episode, things are different now, and we will get to it. Then after the break, what do you think of when I say primate societies? Maybe grooming chimps come to mind, baby monkeys, and I bet the image of a male ape pounding their chest and leading a troop. Well, that last image, that's what we've long been told. It's long been presumed that primate societies were predominantly, nearly always run by males. Well, get this. In a new in-depth study on 79 primate species, this study is challenging that long-held assumption. And this study comes out of the University of Texas, of all places. I mean, I know, it's double fucking crazy. I'm thrilled to tell you, female-biased power structures or social equality between the sexes can be found within every major primate group and probably existed throughout evolutionary history. Yeah, did your jaw just drop? Are you ready to hear the details of this study and fucking tell everyone? Good. That's after the break. In the meantime, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my progressive business goose. To begin, I'm going to need you to rev up the old time machine and slap on some SPF 50 because we're taking a trip to the year 1200-ish and landing face first in the lush greenery of what is today Cuernavaca. Now, for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who may be wondering where in the holy hell this is, don't worry, I've got you. It's actually closer than you think. Everyone please, picture Mexico. Thank you. Now please point to the very south, just before that landmass which curves out like a tail or like a comma. Okay, here is Mexico City. And if you move your finger just a smidge further south, like just an inch, you'll find the Mexican state of Morelos, whose capital is Cuernavaca. Now, like I said, those are its names today, and if you give the place a Google, you'll see more shades of green than you can possibly imagine. Its modern nickname is the City of Eternal Spring. And not bad, because it enjoys a ridiculously pleasant and mild climate all year fucking round, with temperatures rarely dropping below 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius, or rising above 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. It's practically perfect. And back in 1200-ish AD, I could only imagine the overwhelming feelings of the first people to reach the valleys here. It must have been gorgeous, like beyond gorgeous, and it was for certain incredibly fruitful. Needless to say, a bountiful place like Cuernavaca and its agriculturally successful inhabitants would eventually attract attention. The dominant Mexica, or those who the West calls Aztecs, they named the settlers here Lahuka, which means people who work the land. And news of their existence and abundance traveled even farther. According to the Codex Mendoza, quote, in 1379, a Mexica warlord conquered the area, subdued the Lahuka, and exacted an annual tribute that included 16,000 pieces of amate or bark paper and 20,000 bushels of corn, end quote. So it was. And so it went on. For about 200 years, the Lahuka were a part of the Mexica or the Aztec Empire, paying dues, but at least existing. And I say for 200 years because that abrupt halt came to a head when Spanish conquistadors arrived. They, unfortunately, didn't care much for the existence of anyone else, and a nice example of this is the Palace of Cortés, or the Palacio de Cortés, which stands to this day. My friends, it's time. Please drop whatever it is you're doing, be it shucking 20,000 bushels of corn or making a sandwich, it's not important. Pick up your phone and head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. I'm going to actually do that myself. I'm going to bring up the first photo and I'll give you a sec. Okay, I know what you may be thinking. I think you're thinking something like, Jill, not to brag, but I've seen palaces before. And that is no palace, that's a fort. Okay, well, my strategic business goose, you are right. We are both right. This hulking piece of property, composed of thousands of rocks and bricks stacked 2 stories tall with hardly any windows, and adorned with spikes on the roof, this can also be labeled a fortified residence. Yes, and I bet now you're thinking, why? Why would anyone need to fortify their residence like this? What in the holy hell were they up to? Who were they? Seems like they were sus for real, man. Well, again, I am so glad you asked. Hernan Cortés, everyone. Hernan Cortés was a Spanish conquistador who led an expedition that caused the fall of the Aztec Empire, began the first phase of the Spanish colonization of the Americas, and brought large portions of what is now mainland Mexico under the rule of the King of Castile in the early 16th century. Yeah, there was no shortage of horrors and abhorrent actions at this time, and the Palacio de Cortés, this was one of them. And being this whole colonization thing was a long-term project, sometime between 1523 and 1528, Hernan leveled a Lahuka Aztec tribute collection center. This was an important cultural structure that paid homage to past rulers and notable people of their society, and he leveled it. And he built this home/fort/fortified residence over that land. Now, when your 9 to 5 is genocide, the folks you intend to wipe out don't take it lightly. They will fight back. And to prepare for this, Hernan made some blueprints for his palace that included some precautions, if you will. Quote, "The original palacio was erected as a fortress with thick walls, merlons, those pointy things you see along the roof there, and other defensive elements. It held its own armory stocked with muskets, a cannon, and other weapons. Nevertheless, most of the building was to serve as a residence supported by a mill, stables, gardens, ovens, and more." End quote. From the wiki. So yes, my friends, Cortés, the Captain General and Governor of New Spain, decided to live like this. Or should I say, tried to. Many attempts on his life were made by La Juca warriors, which I assume made Cortés feel unwelcome. They may not have succeeded in their assassination attempts, but the point was made. As it turns out, my heroic business goose, Cortés, decided not to spend his time at the palace. The extraordinary violence, however, did not stop Cortés from deciding to leave his second wife there, though. Doña Juana de Zuniga? You know what? Whatever. That was her name. Just put a pin in it. She lived here. She was his second wife and lived at the palace. Put a pin in that. Now, the building, built on indigenous land, has been around for 500 years. Its history is long. The events are just too many to mention, but I'll try my hardest to give it to just give you like a best of throughout the years to get us up to modern day. Okay, you ready? Okay, let's start with some good things. Cortés traveled back to Spain in 1540 and died in 1547. Hooray! From 1629 to 1747, the family gradually abandoned the joint, and it was then converted into numerous things like an ironwork, tannery, textile workshop, because it was so fucking huge. In the mid-18th century, colonial authorities ordered a restoration, and then used this nice building as, you guessed it, a barracks and a jail. During the Mexican War of Independence, it housed famous prisoners like José María Morelos. And if you're like, wait a minute, aren't we in the state of Morelos? You're absolutely right. José María Morelos is a goddamn national hero in Mexico. Despite not having any military background, he became a successful insurgency leader and is credited with organizing and bolstering the war for independence. The Mexican state of Morelos and the city of Morelia. Look, we're both in pain this episode, okay, with me having to say anything in Spanish. All of these things are named after him, basically. In terms of figurehead, he's kind of like if George Washington, the Declaration of Independence, a bald eagle, and fireworks had a baby. You know what I mean? That's this. This was the guy. And he was held in this prison here. It was a big deal. Then throughout the 1800s, rich people were like, what are we doing? We should be living in this. And the palace became a palace once more. From 1864 to 1866, it served as a summer residence for the Emperor Maximilian. And soon after, quote, Governor Francisco Leyva expanded the north end and had a stairwell and other areas redone in a then popular French style. The palace remained the seat of state government for about a century, end quote, from the wiki. Now, between who took up residence here and the centuries of history within its walls, the good, the bad, and the very ugly, all of it, this building became a time capsule. It came to represent Mexico itself. As such, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a bonanza of repairs went into effect. In 1930, Diego Rivera himself dolled up the place and completed murals that decorate the arcade on the second floor. Then finally, between 1971 and 1973, the Department of Colonial Monuments of the Instituto Nacional de Antropología y Historia, wow, I think I nailed that one, also known as the INAH, which is what I will be calling it from now on, the INAH converted the building into a museum officially. It has undergone many a name change, but it looks as though that has been settled. Just last year, on March 30th, 2023, it reopened as the new Museo Regional de los Pueblos de Morelos. Yes. Now, my bedazzled business goose, this palace turned museum is home to an overwhelming number of artifacts. There's colonial-era tapestry depicting the conquest of Mexico, probably commissioned by the dipshit Cortez himself. There's the 16th century Mexica gold ornaments on display, 16th century helmets and busty armor, and one body. Yes, you heard me. There is a body here. One single and final resident. According to the INAH website, for the past 50 years, visitors to the museum have been able to see a burial through an archaeological window located under an entrance. It was found sometime during the numerous renovations, and luckily for you, there's no need to hop on a flight. If you'd like to see it for yourself, that's right, just head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post, and I'm going to do that as well. I'm swiping through, and that's a body. That's totally a body. Well, the remains of one. And for my business geese who are oh so busy not looking at a body, I can describe this one to you. The skeleton is in a fetal position, and from what I could see, there are no possessions, no clothing, no jewelry, no markings of any kind. It's like just someone placed here just to rest. And you may be wondering, okay, a body in a palace, that's not too crazy, all things considered. Okay, but who is this person? Well, great question. My friends, get this. For the past 50 years, a plaque on the outside of the viewing window read thusly, quote, "Burial found in situ of a man with deformed vertebra. Traditionally, it is stated that it may be the monk Juan Leva, who served Doña Juana de Zuniga, wife of Hernan Cortez, and resident of this palace. However, due to the type of posture, it may be an indigenous burial," end quote, end scene. Don't talk anymore. That's it. Well, my friends, I can see your face. Your quizzical face says, hold up. Is it a monk? Are you sure? Or are you just defaulting to a man? I mean, did anyone check? My curious business goose, you're fucking nailing it. Those are great questions. And I can tell you, no one checked. That's the story the museum was going with, and that's what's printed on the plaque. So yeah, indeed, this must be the guy. Shut up. Well, nature had other plans. In September 2017, a 7.1 magnitude earthquake occurred in the Puebla state of Mexico, approximately 75 miles from Mexico City. AppliedSciences.nasa.gov reports it impacted a large expanse of the country and caused over 200 fatalities and 1,300 injuries. Extensive damage to buildings and infrastructure was also reported. As of 6 a.m. on September 20th, over 24 aftershocks had been reported. End quote. Well, my friends, if you still have our social media stuffs open, just swipe on through, swipe past the body, and you'll see a map of Mexico and a yellow blot on it. That yellow blot is the impact zone of this 2017 earthquake, and it very much includes Cuernavaca. This 500-plus-year-old building took on damage and had to be repaired once more, and get this, the renovation this time included a fresh opinion on the burial. Enter anthropologists Pablo Neptali Monterroso Rivas and Isabel Bertha Garza Gomez. Yes, whose spider senses were already tingling when they took one look at the burial itself. Quote, "The fact that a clergyman was buried outside his community, even more so that his burial system was not associated with the Catholic canons of the time, suggests it is more related to a pre-Hispanic burial," they said to the INAH Morelos Center newspaper. So this is an interesting start already, but doubts alone don't rewrite history. So the team performed some clickety-clack calculations and clickety-clack forensics, and what did they find? Drum roll, please. Thank you. Wear and tear on the growth of the teeth indicated this person was between 30 and 40 years old. And despite what was called deformed vertebra, the team found no evidence of disease in the skeleton, leaving the cause of death uncertain. But based on the size of the humerus, which is like your upper arm bone, researchers suggest this person was under 4 foot 10 inches tall. So they were really tiny. And best of all, y'all, the wide shape of the pelvis clearly showed that the skeleton was female. Yes. But wait. It gets better. Quote, crucially, the study suggests the body dates to an era spanning 1450 to 1500 CE. Since European colonizers did not arrive in modern-day Mexico until 1511 CE, we can safely assume this is not the body of a Spanish man. End quote. From Tom Hale of IFL Science. Oh, well, here we are, folks. Here we are with our hands on our hips, saying, if 'tis no Spanish monk, for Christ's sake, who is she? Yes, the 1,000th fantastic question from you. Thank you. The anthropologists believe between the date of the body and its location, she was a member of the Lahuca people, and her gravesite was built over when dipshit Cortez constructed the palace he never really lived in. I am proud to say, as of today, the archaeological window has reopened with a new plaque, which states that the burial belongs to a Lahuca woman. And if I may add, she gets the last laugh as the final and rightful resident. After the break, gorillas, chimps, and monkeys, oh my indeed. a brand new study focusing on previously established literature on primates reveals power dynamics among primates are a lot more equal than they seem. Yeah, turns out when you get into the numbers, male dominance in these societies isn't always the case, by far. Someone call David Attenborough. We might need to edit some scripts. Stay tuned.
Wherever there are rules, there is someone going astray. Sex, sleaze, and shady power moves. It's a story as old as time. I'm Kiki Anderson. As a comedian and former journalist, not a lot surprises me anymore. But as we stumble through a doomed world and a digital hellscape, it can drive you crazy trying to make sense of what is and isn't kosher. On Indecent, I'm peeling at the wallpaper of polite society to understand the why and the who behind our taboos. Come along for the ride as I explore everything from porn to politics, tech, and religion.
If you can't get through the day without, rubbing one out in the bathroom stall at the office, you got a problem.
There's a big community around people trying to trade tips and tricks on how to suck your own and just many different pages of threads about this. And then people kind of create friendships through this.
Subscribe, rate, and review Indecent with Kiki Anderson on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also go to ncpodcast.com/indecent to learn more. Indecent with Kiki Anderson, where NSFW meets LMAO.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
When Johann Rall received the letter on Christmas Day 1776, he put it away to read later. Maybe he thought it was a season's greeting and wanted to save it for the fireside. But what it actually was a warning, delivered to the Hessian colonel, letting him know that General George Washington was crossing the Delaware and would soon attack his forces. The next day, when Rall lost the Battle of Trenton and died from 2 colonial Boxing Day musket balls, the letter was found, unopened in his vest pocket. As someone with 15,000 unread emails in his inbox, I feel like there's a lesson there. Oh well, this is The Constant, a history of getting things wrong. I'm Mark Chrysler. Every episode, we look at the bad ideas, mistakes, and accidents that misshaped our world. Find us at constantpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, I'm sure lots and lots of things come to mind when I say Texas, but I bet not one of those things is primate dynamic shakeup. Hold on to your unique cheeks, because that's exactly what we're going to cover in this half of the show. We are taking a road trip over to the University of Texas at Austin, where Rebecca Lewis, a professor of anthropology, and colleague Chris Kirk, also a professor of anthropology, did a little sleuthing lately because something was not quite sitting right with them. Quote, "In the past, primatologists have often focused on the role of males and male power in primate societies," said Rebecca to UT News. "What has sometimes been overlooked is the important role of female power in primate societies." End quote. Yeah, my friends, Rebecca and her team had the audacity to ask, is male dominance, which has for so very long been held as the default in their societies, actually the case? Is it possible there exists alternatives, like female-biased power structures or, gasp, social equality between the sexes? And if so, what variables would have to be in place for these alternatives to exist? Well, sounds like a hefty, decades-long observational study spanning continents and species needs to be performed, right? Well, actually, my beloved business goose, the work has already been done. What hasn't been done is a proper reporting of that data. Let's get into it. Rebecca and the gang's study, titled Evolutionary Patterns of Intersexual Power, just recently published in the November 2023 issue of Animals, ingeniously dove into a massive pile of previous literature, which focused in total on 79 primate species. 79. Their hypothesis was that primate societies can fall into at least 3 categories: male-dominant, female-dominant, or co-dominant categories. And if there's a species which falls into one of these, the team would then analyze which variables correlated with those social patterns. Oh, wait. Okay, once again, I see your face. You're calculating. I can see it from here. I think I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, hold up. What do you even mean by dominance anyway? Like, are you talking about a leader who makes decisions for the larger group? Or straight up bullying? Like, what's going on here? Yeah. Those are absolutely fantastic questions, my ample business goose. Here's what Rebecca and the gang had to say about that. And I couldn't believe this. It's really revealing. Quote, "Importantly, the definition of dominance is not standardized in ethology. Definitions of sex-dependent power are similarly inconsistent. By limiting our study to primates, we were able to reduce some of the variation resulting from order-specific terminology. The definition of female dominance is hotly debated and includes female feeding priority, male submissiveness towards females, and female aggressiveness towards males. Co-dominance is often undefined, but has been applied when females form coalitions against males and when no clear sex-dependent power exists. Finally, male dominance is typically a baseline assumption in mammals and consequently poorly categorized. While precise definitions are preferable in comparative analysis, species labeled as female-dominant or co-dominant exhibit very different intersexual social relationships than species labeled as male-dominant. For most analysis, we compared male-dominant versus non-male dominant taxa, thereby reducing the importance of the exact definition of female dominance and co-dominance, and instead focusing on whether taxa with these labels resemble taxa labeled as male-dominant." End quote. From their study that was a lot. Woo! Well, so, my bipedal business goose, turns out, you heard that right, there's no set definition for these terms. including male dominance, which I think can make for a bit of a mess when looking for, reporting on, and confirming behaviors. Yikes. I digress. And Rebecca and the gang created their guidelines as described as above and dove into all that previous research. So, what did they find, and which factors were common across these three groups? Drum roll, please. Thank you in the back. My friends, not 100%, or 90, or 75, or even 60%, but 58%. 58% of the species that they looked at exhibited male-biased power in their social groups. 58%. New World monkeys, which are primates found in the tropical regions of Mexico, Central and South America, had the most variable power structures, with 40% of those species either co- or female dominant. In Old World monkeys, like baboons and macaques, the team found multiple examples of species that do not have a male power social dynamic. Yeah. So, you may be asking, why do some species resort to one category or the other? Great question. The team found some patterns. Turns out they found that male-biased power was most likely to develop in species where males had a larger body size and longer canine teeth than their female counterparts. So, physical differences played a role here. For groups with a co-dominant or female-biased power structure, the team noticed there was a lower number of females and a high demand for mating opportunities with those females, so mating was used as leverage. In sum, my friends, their work suggests, quote, that more economic forms of power might really come to the forefront in primate species in which males and females are similar in size and in which females are therefore less readily coerced by males. End quote. Becca Lewis told UT News. So, is patriarchy the default? Not at 58%, no. Not even for monkeys. Thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, telling your friends about the whole male dominance thing in apes, and the Spanish monk for 500 years is actually an indigenous woman getting the last laugh. Such a story, and an appropriately sized hug to the folks over at Airwave Media. Dear God, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you'll love the other podcasts in this family. I will brush up on my Spanish, and please, you stay interesting.